lecture, today's lecture, the, uh, the various parts of today's lecture, I should say, is like this. I would be looking at, I would be oscillating between the art and the act of academic writing from various angles. I will be looking at the art and the act of academic writing from a literature researcher's or teacher's perspective. I will be looking at the art and the act of academic writing from an ELT researcher's or a ELT teacher's perspective. And I will obviously be taking you through some of the other important aspects of academic writing, like how to title our paper, our essay, our academic thesis, whatever it is, how to title, how to write an abstract, what are the components, what are the major components of a good academic piece. So these are some of the things I will be trying to look at, and right through we will have this controversial thing. I will be trying to tell you that academic writing can be an art as well. And whatever I say, I will be basing my arguments on research, on various authors, various writers who have thought and written about academic writing from an artistic point of view. So to begin, see, our webinar is about academic writing in the arts and the humanities. What is this arts and humanities? Normally we speak of arts and humanities in juxtaposition or in opposition with the sciences, and well, we, the researchers or the literature or English language teachers and students, we would be inclined to say the arts and humanities are better than any other discipline in the world. But my teacher friends would agree that when the management is allotting administrative tasks, the management would say, okay, those English teachers, they are free, they don't have much work to do, they are just teaching some poems and some stories, they don't have much preparation to do, so we can assign those administrative tasks to them. And when hours are allotted, I hear this complaint from many teachers, and I think it's a universal phenomenon. When hours are allotted, the first few hours, the first hour, the second hour are usually allotted to the science teachers, while on the other hand, language teachers or literature teachers get third hour, which is considered to be the sleeper class, or the fourth and the fifth hour, which are also times when students are tired. Students may not be in the best frame of mind. So what I'm saying is, implicitly, there is an assumption in the academy that arts and humanities are maybe easier, are maybe better, or maybe, an arts teacher, an arts researcher, a humanities researcher finds it a lot easier to do his work than a researcher from the sciences. In other words, I would say there is an underprivileging or a downplaying of the importance or difficulty of the arts and the humanities. So when we look at this, we have to think about it from another perspective. I would like to bring to your attention a person who documented. He was the first person to actually write about the purpose of arts. It was the Roman poet Horace. He said, the purpose of all art is the Horatian dictum. We call it the Horatian dictum. to delight and to instruct, dulce et utile, to delight on the one hand and to instruct on the other hand. These are the two purposes, the twin purposes of all art. This is what Horace said. And later, during the Renaissance, we had people like Philip Sidney, so many people supporting this idea. And when you look at the whole history of English language or English literature, we can see that there is this bifurcation in opinions, in attitudes as to what the purpose of all art is. Some would say it is the didactic. It is to teach. It is to instruct. It is to teach people lessons, that we have the humanities, we have the arts. And on the other hand, there are people who would say that no, it's not like that. The real purpose, the true purpose of all artistic or humanistic endeavors is to delight the spectator, delight the audience, to delight the reader. Okay. So this is the basic framework. Now my question is this. We are speaking about research in the arts and the humanities. Is there anything delightful about research in the arts and humanities? Theoretically, we will say, yeah, research is a very profitable process. It is adding to your knowledge. It is an academic clarification, academically very profitable. You can say all these things, but the real question is, do we really enjoy the process of research in somebody else is presenting or on video? Dr. JVN and Suresh Y, could you please turn off your videos, please? Thank you. Okay, so why then, see, whenever we are speaking about arts and humanities, we are very proud of our discipline, and we say that it is to delight and to instruct. But why then this delight factor is missing when it comes to research? Yeah, I know you all are ready with the answer. Research is an empirical process. It is a scientific process. And so in research, you cannot think of having a lot of entertainment, having a lot of fun, having a lot of free expression to your creativity. No. That is not the area. Research is not the place where you have to give vent to your creative aspirations. You can do that elsewhere. You can write poetry. You can write for magazines. Do that elsewhere. But in research, it is strictly the province of science. My dear friends, is there any sphere in which the scientists are doing things artistically? If not, why should the artists or the humanists, the arts and humanities people, why should we follow this strictly scientific method? I'm not saying that we should not follow the style guide. And not, yeah, we need a style guide. We follow the MLA or the APS style guide. We will have so many things like that. We have certain rules. We have certain rules regarding punctuation. We have rules regarding grammar. All those things are necessary for better intelligibility, for better communication. We have to follow certain rules. I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking about certain other rules that govern research in the humanities, which for me doesn't make much sense. And for many of my friends whom I have talked to, my student friends, they also tell me, sir, it doesn't make much sense. Why should we avoid the I and the you in all academic writing? Why should we not use any artistic or creative way of writing in academic writing? Why should we not play with words, at least in the title of our research paper? Why not? Why not? Why not? What is the problem? What is the problem? Why are there so many rules? And from that, I would also like to diverge to the other part of our webinar. Our webinar is about arts and humanities, but it is also about arts and humanities in the Indian scenario. And it is here that I want to point out something. In the Indian scenario, things are different. When you look at the practice of research that is being carried out abroad, I'm not glorifying the West or anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to look at the differences in the attitudes of researchers to the activity of research in India and elsewhere in the world. And let me tell you, I'm going to prove to you that there are major differences which are here because we somehow believe that it should be so. But it is not so. It is not so. It is not so. I will try to explain those things. But before going into a research, a pakka research study or a research analysis of the topic, I would like to look at research writing from an artist's point of view. Briefly, very briefly, let us think of research writing. What is research writing? We have an author and we have a reader. Whatever research it is, whether it is a research proposal, whether it is a research paper, whether it is an MPhil thesis or a PhD thesis, what is happening is there is an author and there is a reader. And the author has a purpose. He has to convince the reader. In other words, I would say, even academic writing, we think of only creative writing as an art of persuasion, as an art of convincing the reader. But let us be honest, my dear friends, even in academic writing, there is an art of seduction. There is an art of persuasion. There is an art of rhetoric. The power of words. We do that. We do that. And when you analyze the greatest writers around the globe, I'm speaking not about writing books. I'm speaking not about writing any creative articles. I'm speaking squarely and exclusively about academic writing, research papers, PhD thesis, MPhil thesis. When you look at the best writers in the world, you will realize that they use a lot of techniques to persuade the reader, to convince the reader, to seduce the reader into accepting, into buying the arguments presented by them. And this is simply the idea of arts. What Horace said, dulce et utile, to delight and to instruct. You can instruct, of course. You can convey a lot of ideas, but you can do that in a sweet way. What is wrong with doing things in a beautiful way? That is the question that I would like to ask. And see, when we are thinking about the readers are also busy people, and unless our text is prescribed for study in the syllabus, there is very little chance that a reader is going to follow our writing if it is boring. In other words, we have to make sure that our reader falls in love with our writing. How can we do that? Let me tell you, my dear friends, research writing is not as dry as some of us might think. It is not. It is not dry. Why? Think about it. It all begins with a proposal, right? Research, the entire process of research begins with a proposal. A proposal is something very romantic, right? You give a proposal and somebody accepts the proposal, right? So it's the beginning of something rosy, very colorful. So what I'm trying to say is, I mean, as Amanda would say in The Glass Menagerie, man proposes and woman accepts the proposal, and then everything is fine. We give a proposal for a research work. If it is accepted, we will continue with our research process, and yeah, we will have ups and downs, we will have agonies and ecstasies, we will have feasts and famines in the research process, but it will be a delightful journey as well. If we want it to be so, we can make it a delightful process as well. So what I'm saying is, it begins with a proposal, and from the title of the paper, from the title of your research item, to the end, to the conclusion, to the works cited, we have to keep our reader enchanted. We have to keep our reader mesmerized. We can do that intellectually, definitely. If you can write an intellectually stimulating paper, it will be so captivating that the reader has no choice but to follow your arguments. But not always are we going to have such, alluring arguments that will keep the reader spellbound. So we need this beauty of writing as well. As the knight, as the woebegone knight in Keats's La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, our readers should also follow us through the title, through the abstract, through the keywords, through the introduction, through the research methodology, through the through the literature review, through your conclusion to your work cited. And will it stop there? If you have really succeeded, in convincing your reader will do something else. Definitely he will remember you. If he doesn't remember you, he or she will remember your writing, your research paper, and there is every chance that that reader will tell others about it. In research. And what is that process called? Citation. We call that citation, right? Telling about our writing to someone else in research is the process of citation. So this is what I'm trying to say. See, when we go to the sea, when we go to the beach, we find the conch shell. Wherever you take the conch shell, I know it is a story and it is a myth, but if you put it to your ear, you hear the sound of the ocean. Your research paper, I would say, is the conch shell that will echo in the ears of your reader wherever he goes. And it will tell the story of your ocean of knowledge, your arguments in your research paper. And this is expressly what we want to do, because we want our readers, see, it is not just about the readers. You submit a proposal, you submit an abstract before a research committee. You want them to accept it. And how will you make them accept? Yeah, you have to follow a lot of things. You have to follow the methodology. We will come to that later on in the lecture. But there is nothing wrong with making it pleasing, making it beautiful, making it artistic. Think of Hamlet. In the last scene of Hamlet, I always tell my students about Hamlet because I'm so fond of Hamlet, probably. So Hamlet is dying, and he has something to say to his confidant, to his closest friend Horatio. He says, "If thou didst ever hold me in my heart, absent thee from felicity awhile, and in this harsh world draw thy breath in pain to tell my story." To tell my story. This is what Hamlet wanted. He's about to die. He's about to die. He knows very clearly that he is going to die. But he wants his closest friend Horatio. Horatio also wants to die with his dear friend. And Hamlet tells him, no, 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 my dear friend, you shouldn't commit suicide. You shouldn't die. I want you to live. I know it is very difficult to live in this world. This world is so cruel. This world is so terrible. But I want you to live in this world to tell my story to the world. And this is what every book tells us, every article tells us, every research paper tells us. Tell my story. That is why we attach a lot of importance to citation, right? What is impact factor? What is H index? Aren't all these things about citations? And aren't citations about telling the story of what you read? And to tell the story, you will have to convince your reader. Of course, it has to be intellectual. It has to be academically convincing, but it has to be beautiful also. Otherwise, what will happen is, you know what Hamlet, the parting words of Hamlet in Hamlet, he says, the rest is silence. So if our paper doesn't succeed in convincing, persuading, seducing the reader, what will happen? Our paper will glide into oblivion, into an eternal silence. There will be nothing left. And let us take another analogy from Shakespeare himself. See, in Macbeth we find something like, right? Life is a tale, again a tale, a story. And again I would say, if this is your tale, if your tale isn't convincing, if your research paper isn't convincing, what will happen? It will become a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Signifying nothing. What is the sound and fury? We speak about jargons. We speak about pedantry. We speak about circumambulation. We speak about using very difficult words and very convoluted syntax. This is sound and fury in a research paper. And this sound and fury alone will be left. There will be no magic. There will be no beauty. So this is absolutely one thing that we have to keep in mind when we write anything academic. It is not about creative writing. It is about academic writing as well. It is not only about creative writing. Now, with this brief, introduction to the arts or the artistic way of looking at research, I would like to take you to literature very briefly. After that, we will look at ELT as well. Literature. What has happened to literature, or what is this art and act of academic writing in the field of literature? My dear friends, what we are facing today is a bombarding of theory, We find a lot of webinars happening around the world, around the country on literary theory, and everyone is so upset with it. Students will ask the teachers, sir, is there any escape from theory? We came here to study literature and you are speaking about anthropology, you are speaking about philosophy, you are speaking about Foucault, you are speaking about Lyotard, you are speaking about Derrida. These people's names are difficult to spell or to pronounce, and their ideas are impossible to understand. My dear teacher, I came here to study some little bit of literature because I love some poetry, because I love some stories. And here I am bombarded with a lot of things that have nothing to do with literature. And you tell me that if I have to do a research, if I have to write a paper, it should have a theory. I'm not against theory. Nobody, it's not whether anybody is against theory or in favor of theory. If we speak about against theory, again, that is a theory. After we have after theory, post theory, against theory, the theory wars, we had all that. And that is where more or less we stand in this, pandemic literature world, pandemic studies world. So what I want to tell you is, in literature, this craze with theory began with a research paper, with research writing. One of those idiots, Jacques Derrida, he went to Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore, USA in 1960s, and there they were waiting to celebrate structuralism, celebrate the success of structuralism in the continent. And they wanted to hear it directly from people like Derrida and Foucault. And he was invited, and what he did, he came there, he conquered. What happened, instead of a celebration of structuralism, what happened was a post-mortem of structuralism. He told the death knell of structuralism, and he spoke about the monstrous, fierce, monstrous birth of post-structuralism. It happened in a seminar, in a research paper, Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of the Human Sciences. Derrida presented that paper, and now we are in theory. We are in a lot of theory. Now, I don't want to take you through theory because that is not the purpose of our lecture, our webinar. We have something else to do. I just want to tell you a couple of things about literary theory. Literary theory, there's modern literary theories, I would say, they have one tendency, that is, they question everything, to subvert, to question existing modes of beliefs and practices and conventions. Questioning. Keep this in mind, because when I take you to ELT, we will need this. Literary theory has this habit of questioning things, questioning existing assumptions, and taking us to a different world, taking us to the other side of the picture. Maybe, and then they will say the other side is also not stable. There is no stability anywhere. So you are nowhere. They leave you hanging in air without embracing the margins, as those people would say. So one thing about them is that they will question. They will question all existing assumptions, the theories. And what is the idea behind all questioning? To bring about change. They want to change. They want to change. Whether it is good or bad, we don't know. That's somebody's question. But they want to change. And post-structuralism, postmodernism also speaks about objectivity. What do they say about objectivity? They say that objectivity is a fiction. Objectivity is impossible. Right? I'm sure you will agree. Objectivity is impossible. Absolute objectivity is impossible. That is what post-structuralism and postmodernist theorists would tell you. Yeah. So my question is, aren't we told by our supervisors to be objective in our research? And if we are saying that objectivity is impossible in our lectures, then how can we speak about objectivity in research? Or is it like objectivity is possible in research when you do research, but in our theory classes, objectivity is not possible? Is it like that? Is it like that? Absolutely not. So there is some problem. Yesterday, Murli sir was talking about intellectual humility, and he gave a very dignified lecture and a very academic, scholarly lecture. And somebody Sumi ma'am asked a question about the balancing act between hedging and clarity and precision in academic writing. These are problems. These are problems, and being a much elite senior professor, he stayed clear of all controversies and answered that question beautifully. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to stay clear of controversy. I would rather court controversy than stay clear of it, because the blood boils sometimes. So the idea that I want to tell you is, this is what is happening with literary theory. And now, because of time constraints, I will not take you through a lot of literary theory. I will wind that there. So remember, literary theory questions all existing assumptions. It is against objectivity. It doesn't believe in objectivity. And thirdly, it tries to change the existing world order. So just these three things I want you to keep in mind. And I want to take you through something else. I want to tell you something about what is happening in ELT. ELT. What is ELT? ELT is English language teaching. English language teaching. And if I'm not wrong, many of the participants in this webinar belong to ELT stream, English language teaching stream. So my dear friends, I just want to talk something. I'm not an expert in ELT. Let me tell you at the outset. I'm not an expert in ELT, but I want to tell you something that is happening in ELT right now. When we speak about research in English language teaching, there are two things: research and teaching. Research and teaching. There are two major components to any research in ELT. My dear friends, research and teaching, do you find anything wrong with that? Will these terms go together? Oh, no problem. Or is it like the art of academic writing? Is it some sort of an oxymoron? Do you find something contradictory, paradoxical about the collocation research and teaching? Traditionally, if you look at the history of English language teaching, if you look at research in English language teaching, and if you trace the evolution of the history of English language teaching throughout the globe, you will know one thing, that there has been a huge controversy, a huge problem. What is this problem? People were thinking research is a very, sedate, theoretical activity, while teaching is a practical activity. Theory versus practice. So research in English language teaching means you are trying to, as Dr. Johnson would say about metaphysical conceit, you are trying to yoke by violence together two things that will not go together: research and teaching. But we know that we all do a lot of research in teaching. We do teaching and we do research, and most of the teachers are researchers, or all of the teachers are researchers, and all of the teacher aspirants have to be researchers, with the latest stipulations saying that you have to complete a PhD if you have to be an assistant professor. So research is inevitable in the teaching profession. Now, I want to tell you that traditionally, now we don't feel that there is a big problem with research and teaching being yoked together, being thought of together. But traditionally, research and teaching were considered to be very different spheres of activity, each adhering, sticking on to its own principles, procedures, objectives, and methodologies. You know, the two terms have even been polarized, contributing to a lot of critical wrangling, fighting among the critics who say that no, it is theory, and some say it is practice, and some say it is theory in practice, and some say it is practice in theory. But in recent years, we know that there has been a kind of amalgamation, a kind of amalgamation has set in. Something has happened in research in ELT, and a lot of research, lot of very good quality research is happening in English language teaching. The practitioners of ELT have done great research in, I would say, since the 1980s probably, though not many would agree that we think that English language teaching and research have existed since time immemorial, but it isn't so. Anyway, there is this much I will say, there is a growing literature on the research that is being carried out by teachers and on the kind of models from which such research is drawn. Teacher research. Now, I want you to look at this dichotomy once again. Teaching as a practical activity and research as a theoretical activity. When we actually think about things like that, it will lead to a lot of debate, a lot of hair-splitting arguments, which in the long run may not be very good for research or may not be very good for the discipline itself. And the potential tension between the definition of teaching as an action and of research as an understanding created a lot of problems. Much of the debate about action research, my friends from ELT would agree with me that there is something called action research, and this is where we are heading to. So action research, much of the debate surrounding action research revolves around this conflict. Action research, think about it. Isn't it like silent music, or isn't it like visible darkness? Action research. When you think of a researcher, you are thinking of somebody sleeping. You are thinking of somebody drooping. It's drooping shoulders and that no activity. And when you are thinking of a teacher, you think of somebody who is full of energy, who is bursting forth like an actor on stage, doing a lot of wonderful things on stage. So these things, there was this conflict about research in ELT. Now, let us put it, a systematic, self-conscious inquiry with the purpose of understanding and improving their practice. What is the idea? An inquiry to understand and improve the practice. What is their practice? Teaching. So, by researching, what Hopkins tried to say was this: when a teacher involves in research, he or she is actually improving his craft, improving his or her vocation of teaching, his or her practice of teaching. It helps to understand and improve the practice of teaching. And this is what another teacher wrote. It is, I'm again quoting, it is only when I look at these visions of the class from a researcher's point of view that I can begin to analyze why I am doing what I am doing. This is the question. Why I am doing what I am doing. So my planning process is based on layers and layers of assumptions, experiences, and knowledge. I have to dig deep down to find out why I make the decisions I do. Why does a teacher do something in a particular manner? That is where teacher research becomes all the more important. Brownfield and Mitchell, I'm quoting to great authors, to great names in ELT research. So they have this thing to say about this tension between those two terms. They say there is a particularly strong contradictory pull between research and teaching in that research is a type of contemplation while teaching is a type of action. Teaching is a type of action, research is a type of contemplation. So there was this conflict, and what is the solution for this conflict? I want to take you here. Actually, I was just creating the platform to take you here. The solution was given by Schon, S-C-H-O-N, Schon, in a book written in 1983. The title as well as the theory is this: he calls the teacher a reflective practitioner. In that book, the book is an eponymous book. He calls the teacher a reflective practitioner, action research, reflective practitioner. He argues that the unique and the particular are best dealt with converting a professional's tacit knowledge in action to reflection in action. Knowledge in action, knowledge while teaching has to be converted to reflection while teaching, contemplation, thinking while teaching, and this would help solve the riddle, solve the confusion between action and in theory and practice, or teaching and research. This is what he said, and it ended there. I guess the controversy ended more or less there. There are parallels with Giroux. He said something like, he called the teacher a transformative intellectual. A transformative intellectual. A participant who is engaged in critical thinking, and he argues in favor of theory to enable teachers to see what they are seeing. To enable teachers see what they are seeing. But there is a problem. Reflection is not research. Reflection may be the basis of research, but it is not research itself. And so we have to look elsewhere. We have to look elsewhere. So there is this theory problem happening in ELT as well. Theory. Teachers confront a lot of theory, a lot of theoretical formulations when they indulge in research. And teachers people don't feel comfortable with theory even in ELT. There are certain practical reasons. Unlike in literature, in ELT there are certain other reasons as to why somebody wouldn't be comfortable with theory. One reason is research. Theory symbolizes the power of the researcher to define valid knowledge. And what is the problem with the knowledge that the researcher generates? That knowledge is often couched in the form of generalizations. And a teacher cannot always think about generalizations. See, we can have a lot of theories. They tell us to create a lesson plan before we go to the class. We have to have a lesson plan. But every teacher listening to me would agree that the lesson plan is one thing, what actually transpires in the class is another thing. You cannot follow the lesson plan verbatim because the necessities, the requirements of the classroom, the requirements of each individual student, this is what the teacher has to address. And in doing that, it is impossible for a teacher to follow any theoretical formulation. And when the teacher does that, when the teacher addresses the concerns of the individuals in the classroom, what happens is he or she is working against those theories. And this is why the teacher is very confused. The teacher has a problem. And people who do not know, somebody else, for example, someone from the management comes and monitors how you teach in a class. And you have submitted your lesson plan. And that person from the management, maybe from another discipline, he has come to your class and he is telling you, teacher, what are you doing? You said that you will be doing this and this and these things in your lesson plan. You are not following your lesson plan, isn't it? So there is a problem. It is a practical concern that teachers face. It may not be like this, but this is the idea behind the conflict, the mental anguish that a teacher faces in research when it comes to ELT. And there, in theory, in working with theory in English language teaching, there is another problem. There is an implication that teachers are inadequate. Teachers are inadequate. Why? Because they do not conform to idealized models of the curriculum. There is something called the curriculum, and we have to follow the curriculum and the syllabus and the lesson plan. There are so many things. There are methods and tools and techniques to teaching. We have to follow all that. It doesn't matter if nobody understands anything, but we have to follow all those rules. How will this help? And that is why teachers have a problem, and that is why they want to do research and tell the world about their practical concerns, practical difficulties. Somebody sitting in the West can write something about how somebody should teach, but that theory cannot be applied in an Indian school. It is impossible. The context is different. Likewise, so what I am trying to tell you is, see, when a teacher functions as a researcher in practice, the practice itself becomes a source of renewal for the teacher. It becomes a creative activity. When a teacher involves in research, while he or she is doing actual teaching, it is a renovative process. It reconstructs whatever has been wounded in the teacher because of this bombarding of the theory, and hence the teacher involves in some kind of research. And it is here that people started talking about action research in ELT. And normally when we speak about research in ELT, we are speaking about action research. This term action research, I'll tell you, this term was coined by a person called Kurt Lewin, a German sociologist, and he came up with this idea of action research. I'm not going into the details of action research. I will just give a definition, one of the most quoted definitions of action research, given by Kerr and Kemmis. This is their definition in the book published in 1986. They define action research as, just listen to this and then I will tell you what I am trying to tell you. Action research is a form of self-reflective inquiry undertaken by teachers in teaching situations in order to improve the rationality and justice of their own practices, their understanding of these practices, and the situations in which these practices are carried out. Ideally, I would have loved to explain it more, but I guess you can find it and you can go through that later. So what now I want to tell you about action research is this. I did a basic research into action research, and something that I found was this: the kind of language that teachers and researchers use when they involve in action research. I want you to take a look at this. So when you look at the words used by action researchers, they are using words like this, and you will be surprised. They are using words like empowerment. Think about literary theory as well, and then listen to this as well and tell me if there is any connection. In action research, teachers are speaking about this. Researchers are speaking about these words: empowerment, hierarchy, power, emancipation, subversion, change, status quo, enfranchisement, reactionary, intervention, destabilization. I'm sure my friends would agree with me that these are terms that you encounter in literary theory as well, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is, it's about changing. The terminology that is typically used to characterize action research, empowerment, destabilization, all these words, it tells us that action research strives to challenge entrenched structures of power and authority. They are questioning existing beliefs, and what they also want to do is to subvert autocratic and top-down decision-making procedures. The management, whoever makes decisions, see, we want the right person to take decisions for us, not somebody else. And to emancipate, this is another thing that Krug says. He says, the purpose of action research, from these words it becomes very clear that the purpose of action research is to emancipate individuals from the domination of unexamined assumptions embodied in the status quo. I'm finished with quotation. What I am trying to tell you is this: we are trying, research in ELT is trying to change the existing structure, change the existing order, change the existing hierarchy. They question, they want change, things, aspects that we noticed when we speak about, when we spoke about research in literature or literary theory. And now I would like to speak about two types of research. Very simple. Two aspects of research, or two senses in which, two meanings in which the word research is understood. One, in the first sense, research is understood as the outcome of research as something that establishes, publishes, or utilizes something that somebody already knows. Okay. Research as something that brings to the fore something that is already known. Existing knowledge, bringing existing knowledge to light. That is one way of understanding research, a crude layman's way of understanding research. And the next one, the second sense, is the most commonly used meaning of research. The second sense, the outcome is arriving at knowledge that nobody had before. So arriving at new knowledge as research. So these are two ways in which we can understand. I hope my audio isn't muted. Am I audible?
Sure. Yes, sir, you are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I am trying to tell you is, these are two ways in which we can look at research. Research, one, research whose outcome is known to some people, but it is being publicized, published or publicized. And two, research as something that whose outcome is something that is not known to anyone, not known to anyone. What are these? What is this? I will give you a few examples. A novelist. What does a novelist do? Before he writes a novel, he will do some research. Suppose a novelist wants to situate his novel in 16th century Britain. I'm going to write a novel, and I want to situate my novel in 18th century, 16th century England. So I will study about 16th century Britain. I will study about the Elizabethan theatre. I will study about the conventions, the costumes, the customs, the culture. All these things I will study. This is one type of research. And this research will inform the way I am writing my novel. Right? So this is the first type of research. And a novelist is involved in that type of research. He excavates knowledge that somebody has. Some people know all these things. It is not unknown to anyone. It is known, but it is not known to the author, and that is why he is doing the research. Think of a journalist who gets an exclusive story about a politician, say something wrong that a politician did, and the journalist wants to do an exclusive. So what will he do? He will go and do research. He will do some archival research or something, and find out more details about this person, his sources of income, and all this. And this is also research. But that knowledge is existing knowledge. It is not something that nobody knows. Somebody knows all these things. At least that politician knows about his sources of income and things like that. So this journalist is bringing out that. And think of a policeman. He does the same. He has to investigate. He has to do detective work regarding a criminal. What is that person doing? And there too, he is uncovering something that is known to the criminal. So that is also research. Somebody who is involved in business, marketing, he does a research. We find a lot of advertisements on television which have at the end something to do with the pandemic. They will not say that explicitly, but they will say it has been proved to do this. Everything has something to do with coronavirus these days. Why? Because they know, they do their research, and they know that people are looking for solutions. And so market research, they do their advertising based on market research, based on people, what are people's tendencies, what people buy, why people buy certain things, which products can sell. So all these things. So I have given you a few examples of research as it happens, in a context where you are not discovering something new, but you are uncovering something that is already known, but not known to you. That is one type of research. And another type of research is finding out new things. It's very obvious. We all know what it is. Medicine. We are trying medical science. They are trying to find medicines for COVID-19 virus. Finding out a medicine. It's research. They are doing a lot of procedures and a lot of laboratory, activities to find out a medicine, find out some medication for this illness. So find out something that is not known to anyone, medical science. Or think about science and technology. Probably when at least we arts and humanities people, when we think about scientists, we are reminded of NASA, we are reminded of ISRO, Space Research Organization. Those are the two sets of scientists we know. NASA does a lot of research, and ISRO does a lot of research. So they also are finding out things normally that are mostly unknown to people. And now let us come to the teacher, the language teacher. What does a language teacher do? To which category does a language teacher belong? to the first category or the second category? Where can we fit in the English language teacher? Anybody? Or should we find a new category for English language teachers? Well, when you think about language teaching, yeah, maybe, yeah. When we think about language teaching, language teachers do both kinds of research. Yeah, they do both types of research. They can be kept in the center. Yeah. So language teachers do research in the first sense. In the first sense, finding things that are already known. But the problem is that is not credited. Nobody gives us credit for the first type of research. We do a lot of research in the library, right? We scan a lot of textbooks. We read a lot of books from the library to find out examples of the language and target exercises to include in our lesson plans. We do all that. We find materials for conveying the points that we want to convey. We find appropriate examples, appropriate texts that can be used as examples. We check our understanding of grammatical, pragmatic, cultural descriptions in giving our explanation to our students. We try to find out why students have made certain types of mistakes and how those mistakes can be avoided. We look for remedies. Teachers do a lot of things. But this is not credited. There is no credit. It is not considered productive research. This type of research, all of us are involved in this type of research, but this research is not considered research. And especially when it comes to language teachers, a language teacher is a rarity in the library, they say. But we don't go to the library because we have all the hours to engage. So how will we go to the library? That is what the language teacher asks. Whatever be, the language teacher has to do a lot of research on his own. And then in the second sense also, the language teacher has to do research, finding out new things. And that is what we call academic writing. We have to do a lot of academic research. So on the one hand, we are involved in detection, finding out authenticity, utility, to create, if the teacher's classroom activity can be seen as a product delivered to the students, we are involved in product development. The teachers are involved in product development. But the problem is, this type of research lacks the elements of originality, innovation, and theory building which characterize research in the second sense. And what is this research in the second sense? Finding out something new. And the language teacher faces other problems when he or she involves in the second type of research. What are those risks involved of added commitments of time and application? There are only 24 hours. For language teachers also, there are only 24 hours. But they have to do it. They have to do it. Within this time limit, they have to do it. So add commitments, more pressure over your time and application. Then sometimes the teacher, after doing his research, may have to alter his own way of teaching or her own way of teaching, because research can lead to new understanding, new awareness. So the teacher is in a continuous process of evolution, and teacher research helps the teacher evolve as well. And then there are other problems as well. See, when you very practical problems, you want to do research, you want to enroll for PhD, you ask for the management for permission, and they say, see, please focus on your work. If you go for PhD work, then who will handle these classes? There are a lot of practical problems and risks that threaten teachers, students, their employers. So the stakeholders will never be happy Whatever we do, if we don't do research, they are not happy. If we do research, they are not happy. So the teacher finds himself or herself in a quandary all the times. And this is the fate of research that happens in 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 literary field, in academic field, in English language teaching field. Now, having taken you through literature and ELT, yeah, it happens in all institutions. It happens everywhere. It is a universal phenomenon, no doubt about that. So let us look at the facets of research or research writing. Yesterday, our head of the department, ma'am, she was talking about students, what all activities, academic writing activities, the students have to involve in. But here I would like to talk about the activities that a researcher, a research scholar, and a teacher have to involve in. See, basically, what is this research activity that we are doing? We have to have a proposal. Anywhere we have to give a proposal, a statement of purpose, sometimes they call it abstract, they call it synopsis, they call it, but something we need. And then we have the thing, the thesis. We sometimes call it the research paper, sometimes we call it the MPhil thesis, and sometimes we call it the research project or the PhD thesis. Whatever you call it, the structure is more or less the same. The rules of the game are more or less the same. It is like 20-20 and 50-50 and test cricket. You know, if you know to play one form of cricket, you will be able to play the other two forms of cricket as well. So if you continue with the analogy, you can say a research paper is like the 20-20, 1,500 to 2,500 words short. You can write it in lesser time. An MPhil thesis can be, or a research project can be likened to 50-50 cricket, one-day international cricket. And what would be discussed? Test cricket. Yeah, test cricket is boring. People say, I don't know. Test cricket, we will have our PhD going on, never-ending process. Nothing happens. Nobody comes. Nobody goes. It's all awful, and students say everything is stuck. Everything is stuck. So these are the things that we are talking about in academic writing, basically. So basically, I would say there are 2 or 3 things, or let us look at it from a structural point of view. What are the aspects of research writing? I'm not going into any theory. I'm just speaking about the practical things. When you look at any research, you will find certain things. You will find a title. Then you will find an abstract, hopefully. Then you will find a list of keywords. Then you will find the full paper or the dissertation or the project, whatever it is. And at the end, you will find a work cited or a bibliography. And when you look further into the research paper or the thesis, you will find things like there is an introduction, there is a body where you have all these things happening, literature review. What is this literature review? We are paying tributes to the dead writers of the past. Otherwise, they will haunt us. They will create us problems. So that we have to give credit to them. We tell them that, okay, I have acknowledged you. You did something extraordinary. I am acknowledging you, and I want to say something new, but I want you to bless me. It's my tribute to you. So my literature review. I'm reviewing the literature, and then I will have to write about the purpose of my research, thesis statement. All those things will make the recipe, will comprise the recipe called research writing. research writing. Now, 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 let us think about something else. You know, when you look at an elephant, what you see is the elephant never tries to escape, despite the fact that it doesn't have any big chains or anything. You know, the elephant is very mighty. And I want to compare you and me, the researcher, to the elephant. Why? Oh, because we are big? No, that is not the idea. Because we have big brains. Ethologists, people who do studies on animal psychology, I think, ethologists. So ethologists would tell you that the elephants are one of the world's most intelligent animals, elephants. And let me tell you one more thing, and this will make you happy with the comparison of a researcher with the elephant. You know, the elephant has the biggest brain. The heaviest brain of all land animals is the elephants. And when you compare the proportion of brain mass of an elephant with even a whale, which is the largest creature, the elephant has a lot more brain than even the whale. Not in size, but in proportion. So I guess it's over 5 kg. The brain of a researcher, no, of an elephant weighs over 5 kg. And interestingly, our great old forefather Aristotle has something to say about the elephant as well. Aristotle said that the elephant is the animal that surpasses all others in wit and mind. Aristotle gave elephant a mind as well. So, whatever, I'm sure you are now happy with comparing you with an elephant. Now, I want to come to my point. What happens to the elephant? The elephant is the strongest animal. It's very strong. It's very mighty. And you will see the mahout, the elephant rider sitting on top of it. He sits on the asana, as they say in Sanskrit, the asana. He sits there and he controls the elephant. He has a stick in his hand. I'll come to that stick later, but before that, I would like to tell you about this. There is a small chain fastened to a metal collar around the elephant's foot, and this chain will be attached to some wooden thing or something, a pillar or something, and this is all that is there to hold the elephant, and the elephant never tries to escape. Why? Is it because the elephant is intelligent? So it doesn't want to escape. It understands that all the world is a stage and it has nothing to do with me. No. Why? Because the fact is the elephant is conditioned into believing that it cannot escape. If you visit the kraal, K-R-A-A-L, one of the few words in English with consecutive A's, kraal, a place where elephants are kept, kraal. When you visit a kraal, you will see them training an elephant. And when an elephant is a baby, they train the elephant by tying the same rope or the same chain that they use later also. And naturally, the baby elephant will try to escape. But because it is small, it will struggle to escape, but it cannot break free. And its legs will pain. And it will try again and again and again, and it will come to the sad realization that it cannot escape. And then what happens is the elephant becomes conditioned to the idea that this chain is unbreakable. It is beyond my ability to break this chain. And that is why the elephant stays quiet on that small piece of rope or that small piece of chain fastened on its leg. Okay. And one more thing. I'm sure you are getting me that you are a researcher. Vasanta Narendra sir, could you please start? Yeah, thank you. So you all are researchers, so you are getting my point that there is a small rope tied around our leg that is preventing us from doing what we want to do in research. What is that? A lot of rules and conventions, and we are conditioned into believing that we cannot break those rules. And interestingly, very interestingly, I want to tell you this. I told you that the mahout, the elephant rider, has a stick with which he rides the elephant. Metaphorically, the word that they use for this stick is guide. Guide. Think research guide. So we have two things when we do when we do our research. We have a stick, the guide, and we have the chain, the rules, and both will make sure that we will not do anything useful. I'm not saying that the guide is against you. The guide has the best of purposes in mind when the guide tells you these things. That when the guide tells you that you have to do this like this, you have to do this like that, the guide has the best of purpose. But the problem is the guide is also helpless. And this is why I want to tell you that we have to break free of these invisible chains, false limitations. See, whenever we speak about stylish academic writing, we think that it is an oxymoron. It is not. And when we say that we have to write in academic writing should be artistic, we think that people will blame us for intellectual shallowness, lack of depth. No. Very often students come to me and tell me, sir, my writing, I read this and I find it very boring because I don't have any huge vocabulary, I don't have high sounding words, and my paper looks very bad. We tend to think that it should have those pompous words, high sounding words. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so we think that there are certain things that are there which are actually not there. Which are actually not there. And neither the researcher, nor the research guide, nor the research committee tell anybody about these things. When we start doing our BA, they will tell you BA course, bachelor course, they will tell you, oh no, don't worry about research, that is things that you have to do later on. So we will discuss that later when you go into higher classes. And when you go into your MA course, they will tell you that, okay, we have lot of syllabus to cover, so we don't have time for this, finished. And when we go for PhD or when we register for an MPhil, we will have, of course, this coursework. And there they will tell you, of course, you have studied all these things earlier. Earlier in your BA, MA, you have studied all these things. So nobody tells us anything about how to do research. This is what is happening in our country. Everybody is doing research, but nobody knows how to do research. And it is not anybody's mistake because we haven't been taught. We cannot blame a student for misusing or abusing a mobile phone if we haven't taught him how to use the mobile phone. So if we haven't taught our students how to do research, how to write an abstract, what is the meaning of a thesis statement? How do you find a topic for your research? See, finding topics. Most people find it immensely impossible to find a topic for their research. And everyone tells you that you have to, of course, you have to find your topic for your research. But how, sir? You have to read. Read what, sir? Of course, you have to read books. Then what, sir? Then you have to read the journals. Then what, sir? Then you have to find out your title. So nobody actually tells us how these things happen, where these things come from. It is as if it's understood, and we cannot ask anything, because if we ask, we are afraid of asking. When we ask, we may be found out. People may think that we are mad. If in a forum like this, in a webinar like this, if you ask, sir, what, how can I write an abstract? Then others, we think that others will be laughing. Actually, everyone wants to ask this question. Everyone. Nobody knows. Everybody is anxious to know these things, but nobody is ready to ask. And if we ask, the problem is not with our anything. It is because if we ask, we have always been chastised and silenced. That is why we no longer ask any questions. Now, we have to realize the choices before us, the stylistic, artistic choices before us. You know, what I want to tell you is we have to start an artistic revolution in academic writing that will end up in improved reading conditions for all. My dear friends, let me ask you honestly, how many of you have read your research paper after it has been published? And how many of you can tell you with courage that my research paper has been read by at least 50 people, at least 5 people, except the reviewer? Has anyone read my paper? No. Have I read my paper? Yeah, I read something. I didn't read. I didn't read the primary materials because it was very heavy. Of course, I read some secondary material, and that is it. We don't read our own research. Then will anybody else read? Why? Why? Yeah, we are busy, but there is another thing. It is so dull. It is so boring. It is so unbearable, unreadable. You know, who wants to read this kind of rugged, rubbish prose that has a lot of technical words, lot of jargon? They call it, you know, like tendonitis, they call it jargonitis. Jargonitis, this illness of using a lot of jargons, jargonitis. So if you doubt that you have jargonitis, I will tell you I will tell you the symptoms of jargonitis. To do that, take your paper, take your research paper, a research paper you have written, and underline the words in your research paper which people who do not belong to your discipline, suppose you belong to ELT, so, people who do not belong to ELT will not understand. Underline those words and count them. In a research paper, count the number of words which somebody who doesn't belong to your discipline will not understand, and that will be the jargons. Those are the jargons. Those are the jargons, and those tell you that you are using a lot of jargons, and we use jargons sometimes to impress, sometimes because we don't want anybody to understand what we write, because if they understand what I write, I will be caught. So better to write it in such a way that nobody understands, and then I will be safe. This is one thing that most of us think. And it is convention. We have to do it in such and such ways. So if we don't have those high sounding words, hey, this is not a good research paper. Very bad, very bad. What is this? So this is what happens. But let me tell you, based on my research, I will give you the findings of the research after the lecture. So based on my research, based on research done by some eminent people at the University of California, I will give you the names of those researchers. Research done by Helen Sword, Professor and Director of the Center for Learning and Research in Higher Education at the University of Auckland, a colleague, a very senior, very reputed colleague of mine. She works in the University of Auckland, and one research. Then another person, Stephen Pine, then earlier I had referred to some other researchers. All these people have said this, that what am I telling you, that there are no such rules that bind us, and the best writers in the world, the best academic writers, I'm not speaking about creative writers or people who write books and publish it in the market. No, I'm speaking about academic writers, people who write research papers and get it published in very reputed journals. These people, they publish in peer-reviewed journals their articles, and they write their articles artistically. Let me tell you, I will give you the evidences artistically, and of course their books are published by prestigious publishing houses, and they are, you know, praised by their colleagues for their rigor and flair, dulce et utile. They have some great ideas to convey, but they do that beautifully. They do that beautifully. So why is it that the Indian higher education system tells us to follow all these rugged, rigid rules of dismal writing? Is it because of the journals? Do you think there are so many journals? Do these journals hold a monopoly on dismal writing? Have they said that we will accept articles only if you write in such and such boring, terrible ways? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And is it then that the professors who are doing this? Absolutely not. The professors think that the journals want it in such a way. The journals think that the professors want it like that. Nobody actually wants it like that. But what is happening is we are trained to write abstract, convoluted sentences that mean absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. You know, no research guidebooks, because they want to capture, yeah, it's exactly stereotyping. It is stereotyping, absolutely. The comment was spot on. Yeah, so when you look at the guidebooks given to academic writers, there is nothing in those guidebooks as well. I will give you those statistics as well. A research conducted on the guidebooks given to academic writers. And what do the experts say about these things? I will quote some people, short sentences, which you will find very useful, because when you go to your research guide, and when your research guide chastises for you for something, you can use these quotations. You know, quotations should be used at the right point of time, right? So William Sinser, Sinser, he identifies humanity and warmth as the two important qualities of effective academic writing. How many of you have heard this? How many of you have been told that humanity and warmth should be the most important qualities of effective academic writing? Has anybody told you that you should be humane and you should be warm? Basically, it is about being emotional, expressing yourself, expressing your feelings. We are never allowed to express ourselves. No I, no you, no first person, no second person, absolutely not. But these are the authorities. These people are the authorities in academic writing today, and they say, William Sinser, humanity and warmth are the two most important qualities of effective academic writing, not creative writing. Another person, Peter Elbow, another very reputed person who writes and speaks a lot. He goes around the country telling the world that you should stop doing this rubbish and write artistically. So Peter Elbow, he urges academic writers to construct persuasive arguments by weaving together the creative and critical strands of thinking. Weaving together creative and critical strands of thinking. What is this? To delight and to instruct. Peter Elbow, Elbow. I will give you a few more people. You can read and find evidences from those books. Because of time constraints, I will not be able to tell you about those people. One person is Richard Lanham, Lanham, Richard Lanham. Then another, Strunk and White. These people have all been saying this. And Helen's Word, this lady is doing a YouTube channel to convince people about the importance of this. She's a professor at Auckland, and she, at a senior age, she's a senior professor. Srinivas, who is this? Srinivas Kottagiri, could you please turn off your audio, whatever? Thank you. Yeah. So why does this happen? Why does this happen? I will tell you. I will read out something from a very beautiful essay. If you want, you can read it. The title itself is very amusing. The title is Dancing with Professors. Dancing with Professors. I don't think it is about having a dance program with the professors. It is something else, but it is very interesting. Read this essay. It is written by Patricia Nelson. So I'm just quoting a few lines from that essay. She says, I do not believe that professors enforce a standard of dull writing on graduate students in order to be cruel. They demand dryness, this bad style of writing, because they think that dreariness is in the student's best interests. They believe that writing this dull kind of prose is necessary for the student to flourish. That is why they ask the students to do so. And she continues, professors believe that a dull writing style is an academic survival skill, because they think that this is what editors want, both editors of academic journals and editors of university presses. What we have here is a chain of misinformation and misunderstanding, where everyone thinks that the other guy is the one who demands dull impersonal prose. So there is nobody who says this. Everybody says, he said that, he said that, she said that. I didn't, no, the teacher said like this, so that's why we are doing this. This is what the editors would say, and teachers would say the editors will not approve your article if you write this kind of flowery language. No, you have to write the dull prose. You know, great academic writers express complex ideas clearly and precisely. They produce elegant, carefully crafted sentences. They convey a sense of energy, commitment, passion, engage and hold their readers' attention, tell stories, avoid jargons, except when it is absolutely necessary, provide readers with aesthetic and intellectual pleasure, and write with originality, imagination, and creative flair. Have you heard any of these words in connection with academic writing? I'm sure no. You won't have heard any of these words in connection with academic writing. And the evidences that I will give you from that, I'm telling you. So, from an analysis of some 100 best quality research journals published in the world on humanities subjects, especially literary studies. This is the finding. Literary studies, 100 of the best journals, no Indian journal unfortunately, 100 of the best journals published in the world on humanities, most of them, about around 60% of them being journals from literary studies, language and literature studies. So from this research, I'm telling you some of the habits of great academic writers. One, they use interesting, eye-catching titles and subtitles. Yeah, we can write good titles, right? Catchy titles and subtitles. Then, second one, first-person anecdotes or asides that humanize the author and give the text an individual flavor. the document that I will give you will tell you that 96% of these great academic writers write using the first person, I, and they use the second person to address the reader, you. And we are told, till date, we have been told not to use the first person and not to use the second person at all. Absolutely. This is what we are told, but that is not true. First person anecdotes or asides that you think about it, my dear friends. We belong to arts and humanities. And what is it? We are concerned with human beings, right? We are concerned with human beings. So what is sensible in saying that we should not use I and you and we in our writing? Does it make any sense? Does it make any sense? You know, what we found in the research was very compelling. The researchers, research in India and research abroad. Researchers in India from atomic science, which has nothing to do with I or you. The atomic science, they are discussing about atoms. So these people who work with atomic science, they 92% of them use I and you in their research writing. And we say that we don't use I and you because we want to sound scientific. To sound scientific and objective, we have to use prose which doesn't use I or you. This is what we are told. But scientists use that. This is what I want to tell you. Scientists in India use that, while people like us who are dealing with emotions, passions, I, you, human beings, we are told not to use I or you. It's the Indian context I'm speaking about, not anywhere else. But this is wrong. If you if you submit a journal to a foreign journal, they will never tell you to remove I and you from your paper. You know what? I want to tell, see, so that is another thing. Then another thing that you find with great academic writers, catchy opening paragraphs that recount an interesting story. Story. We will never say story in a research paper, right? Story. Then ask a challenging question. We are told not to begin our academic writing with a question at all. Dissect a problem, somehow they hook and hold the reader. Then another thing, numerous examples, especially when explaining abstract concepts, visual illustrations, not these pie graphs and charts and things like that. They use a lot of photographs, they use a lot of manuscripts, similes, things that we can relate to. They have a lot of references to a broad range of academic, literary, and historic sources indicative of wide reading and their knowledge. And finally, this is most interesting, best academic writers in the world employ humor, whether explicit or understated. They use humor in their writing. So these things are happening, and that is why I want to tell you that when we write good research papers, we have to think about these things. We have to give attention to artistic things. And you know what, I will, because of time, I think I have crossed the time limits, but still I will give you a couple of examples just to tell you what is wrong with our academic writing. Just a few examples. Richard Lanham, in his book, Richard Lanham poses a very interesting question. He says that academic writing today is like this. He says, who is kicking whom? Kicking. Somebody kicks somebody, And we are asked to write this in such a way that nobody will understand who kicked whom. This is his example. He says, no student these days feels comfortable writing simply Jim kicks Bill. Jim kicks Bill. But you cannot write like that. So what you have to do, the system requires you something like, one can easily see that a kicking situation is taking place between Bill and Jim. So we do not know who kicked whom. No? And why are we told to remove this I, my dear friends? Because when we say things with I, you are talking to the reader. And when you address the reader as you, the reader will feel involved, right? So, Bill and Jim. And he continues, this is the kind, or sometimes you will have to write this sentence like this. Jim kicks Bill. Example given by Richard Lanham. He's the professor of English at the University of California, Los Angeles. He says, this is the kind of situation in which Jim is a kicker and Bill is a kicky. Now we have to look at the dictionary and find out what is kicker, what is kicky, all these things. And even in schools, he says, even in schools, you must write, you cannot say Jim enjoys kicking Bill. Instead, you have to write, kicking Bill is an activity hugely enjoyed by Jim. What is it? What is happening? It doesn't make any sense at all, but you know, so I was telling you about the classical instance of the first person and the second person, and you know what happens? How do we avoid? So many people are asking me. I can see the question. So, sir, are you telling us to be subjective in our writing? But are we able to be objective in our writing by just avoiding I and you? This is the question. Absolutely not. What we do is, some people do it like this. Instead of I, so the professor has told us that I shouldn't be using I. So some people do this, they will use we. I am the only author, still I will say we. What is this we? I mean, and the kings used to say hum, me, plural. So we wish to say, or sometimes we will include the reader. We will understand. I am the writer and you are the reader, and so I cannot use I, so I am saying, dear reader, we, you and me together, we are we, no. So we. And if we cannot write we also, then what we will do? The researcher has observed, the writer has argued, we will use such things. And if that is not possible, then we will take the paper and we will say, this research paper attempts to argue, this research article demonstrates. What is it? Just intellectual madness, no? Why should we say that? Yes, I can say that I, you. What is wrong with saying things in a normal way? And if that is also not possible, we will do with a lot of passive voice. We will bring in a lot of passive voice. It can be shown, the research was performed. But what is that actually, my dear friends? It can be shown, or the research was performed. Actually, the research was performed by me. That is there. That is just not spoken, but it is there. So what is the use of inverting the whole system and avoiding all I's? We have to use I. 2 days back, I was reading a paper written by one of my friends, and she had used a lot of quotations from a book. It was about genital mutilation. So female genital mutilation, and the paper had a lot of quotations. And you know what, when I read the paper itself, it was a research paper, but when I read the paper, I could feel tears in my eyes because it was written in the first person, and she quoted it from the book, right? Maybe she could have paraphrased it. She didn't do that. She quoted it because she wanted to bring the essence and the real feeling, the real pain experienced by the protagonist into her paper. And she did it successfully by quoting that. So I does the use of I and you can do a lot of beautiful things. So why should we humanities people live in an unhumanitarian academic research world? Our researchers should be humanitarian, should be humane, should have human beings, should have I and you. And this is something that is very important. And I guess it is almost time. I will give you some examples of titles used, great titles used by some of the great writers. I just want to, I will take the example of Richard Dawkins, the famous science writer. So Richard Dawkins, he is an exceptionally talented person when it comes to titles. I will just read his titles and see how creative his titles are. The selfish gene, Gene, selfish gene, the extended phenotype, the blind watchmaker, river out of Eden, climbing Mount Improbable, unweaving the rainbow, a devil's chaplain, the ancestor's tale, the God delusion, the most famous one, the God delusion. He's an evolutionary biologist, and see how artistic his titles are. Then you will tell me, sir, these are titles of books, not academic writing. Then I will quote one title which he published in the most esteemed journal called Science in 1969. Science, very famous journal with science people. So in that journal, he published a research paper which had a very beautiful title. Bees are easily distracted. That was the title of his paper, research paper. When he was a novice, he gave that title. Honeybees. Bees are easily distracted. Think about it, how metaphoric and how beautiful a title it is for a research paper written by a person from evolutionary biology. So think about it. And he has evolved since 2009. Until then he was using titles which are just single phrase, but after that he began using titles like The Greatest Show on Earth, The Evidence for Evolution, The Magic of Reality, How We Know What Is Really True, An Appetite for Wonder, The Making of a Scientist, Brief Candle in the Dark, My Life in Science. See, one part is to entertain the reader, to engage the reader, and the second part of the title is to inform the reader, to delight and to instruct. How beautifully he does that. And I will give you titles of essays, academic essays written by great writers, which are very creative. Think about Roland Barthes. He spoke about the death of the author. How simple it is. The death of the author. Isn't it such an artistic title? Isn't it such an artistic title? I will give you the title of another very interesting title. A study that was done in the United Kingdom in 2006. The study was titled simply, Why Children Die, a pilot study. Why Children Die, a pilot study. This is what they titled, and it became a very famous essay, and it was read by common people, aam aadmi. Everybody read, not everybody, but most of the people read this article because it was, very easy to understand, and the title itself talked to the reader. Why Children Die. Oh, I also want to read it, right? Everyone would want to read about these things. But suppose this report is being prepared in India. How will we title that? The title will be something like a methodological and practical considerations in the conduct of a confidential national inquiry on child mortality, a feasibility study. This is not my words, I'm just quoting. If this study was conducted in India, the original title is Why Children Die, a pilot study. But had this study been conducted in India, the title would be like this. methodological and practical considerations in the conduct of a confidential national inquiry on child mortality, a feasibility study. How many of us will read that essay? This is the problem. This is the problem. So our titles should be engaging and informative. And the title can ask a question. What is wrong with having a title that asks a question? My literature friends would agree that you know a lot of titles that are questions. Is there a text in the class? Stanley Fish, reader response criticism. Is there a text in the class? Michel Foucault, he is very difficult to read, but he has written a wonderful essay and he has titled it, What is an Author? Very simple, na? Very simple question, but it is very clear. What is an author? And you know the book. How many, Manjulatha ma'am says, I know why the caged bird sings. I know why the caged bird sings. Thank you for reminding that great title, ma'am. Maya Angelou, the great writer from America, who spearheaded the swearing in ceremony of 3 American presidents. Maya Angelou, who was raped when she was 10 years old. And she wrote this book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Truly great work. Thanks for reminding, ma'am. And then, so how many children had Lady Macbeth, the book? Or you can offer a challenging statement or fact or opinion. Think about T.S. Eliot's titles, Hamlet and His Problems. Very simple, but very effective. Or A Room of One's Own. Think about it, how artistic it is. Or you can invoke a metaphor. The Sacred Wood by T.S. Eliot, The Spectre of Hegel in Coleridge's Biographia Literaria. Or you can bring 2 things together which are not usually brought together, like an juxtaposition, an unexpected juxtaposition, like what Northrop Frye did in his Anatomy of Criticism. So there are a lot of ways in which you can create titles. Since I have exceeded the time limit by a huge margin, I would wind up without going into the details on how to write an abstract, but I will definitely give you the materials I have prepared for that. I will hand it over to the coordinators of the program. I will give you 2 PDFs. One, you can go through that and understand what I was telling. And I have given you the bibliography as well, citation as well. So whatever I had told you about being artistic in your academic writing, I have given evidences for that. 3 major statistical studies I have included in that. So you can go through that. That is my first PDF. And in the second PDF, actually I wanted to do this also, but because of time constraints, I just exceed the time limit every time. I'm so good at it. So I'm not able to do that. So that is about how to write an abstract. And there I have very simple manner, I have explained how you can write an abstract in 10 sentences. 10 sentences of, and I have divided it into 5 subdivisions, 5 parts of 2 sentences each with examples. And I'm sure that you can use those examples, you can use those vocabulary items to write your abstract. So tomorrow anyway, somebody is saying extended the time limit, I don't know. Anyway, tomorrow we will have other things to say. That's why I have to conclude this session today. So this is about the act and the art of academic writing. I just wish that people who have listened to me, my dear friends, please make sure that it may not be always possible for you to be artistic in your academic writing, to convince your research supervisors, but at least when you become supervisors, when you do research on your own, please be artistic. And if you are teachers, take these research items to your students and tell them, remove these superstitions. Tell them that it is okay to use I and you. Yeah, they will find obstacles. They may find obstacles in the form of their research supervisors. It may happen because not everybody will agree to you, but you have these evidences, and if you Google on the internet, you can find thousands of examples. And let me tell you, it is 90 to 96% I am speaking, not anything else, not 50%. 90 to 96% of great academic writers have been artistic in their act of writing academically. So with that, I wind up today's session, and I hand over the stage, the east stage, to the organizers. I am willing to take any number of questions. Time is not a problem, but I guess most of you want to have your lunch. It's up to you. I am ready to take questions. You can ask questions, any number of questions. I will be here. Yeah.
Sir, thank you so much, sir. I request our participants to ask questions.
When participants don't ask questions, it can mean two things. Either they have understood everything or they haven't understood anything.
So they have
Yes.
understood a lot, sir.
Saraswati.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please.
Sir, I'm Saurabh,
Yes,
and
sir. Welcome.
actually, I was listening to your lecture very minutely, and
Thank you.
you were talking about uh, two thoughts that we generally tend to impose upon research, especially in India. First is that is outcome of a process, right? And that deals with bringing forth the existing knowledge, and
Yeah.
another one is bringing forth something which is unknown to us.
Yeah.
So you gave two examples. The first one consisting of police and journalists, and the second one was researchers. I mean,
Yeah.
those who are especially in the scientific fields, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But what about the research that we, the student of English literature, conduct? I mean,
Yeah.
when we research something about which is related to what we call abstract, I mean, when we dive deep into one's psychological processes, what would you say about that? I mean, it is not something which is already based. It cannot be a archival research. It is something which is completely new.
Yeah. Literary research.
Yes, sir. So what
Okay.
is your take on it?
Take on literary research. Could you please explain better and rephrase it?
Yes, sir. Actually, you divided the
No,
category
that
of
is fine. That part is fine. Then,
okay.
so
So my question is, when a person is doing literary research, and if he is involved in analyzing someone's character, I mean,
yeah.
if it is based on the psychoanalysis,
Yeah.
then it is also something which is unknown, and this is also bringing forth something which is unknown to us and giving light to that.
Exactly, my dear friend. What you said is spot on, and that is what we need to realize as well. It is new knowledge. It may not be
Yes, sir.
acknowledged. It is
It is
not
a kind of new knowledge.
acknowledged, but it is new knowledge. It is addition to existing knowledge, because it may not have a truth value. For example, as you said, psychoanalytic reading. When
Yes.
Ernest Jones did the psychoanalytic reading of Hamlet, he
Hmm.
said that Hamlet had Oedipus complex, and that is why he
Yes.
delayed. This is what he said. If we think about facts, it is not fact, because first and foremost,
Yes.
Hamlet is a character in a play. It is not factual. And secondly, the statement he has made, Hamlet has Oedipus complex. Of course, he explained it beautifully in his article, in his research. But the thing is, it is not straight away observable in the play Hamlet, but it has added a lot to existing knowledge, and that is what we have to look at. So, unfortunately, what is happening is in humanities research, this sort of findings that we make in our research are not usually considered as findings. They say, see, that is why Plato called the poets liars, right?
Yes.
Exactly, because but Plato was a great poet himself, and his
Yes.
idea in calling the poets liars was he wanted to have a republic. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done that, and he banished poets from his ideal republic only because he realized that if poets were there in his ideal republic, people would listen to them instead of the
Yes. Exactly.
king. That is why. So, similarly, this is a question. So, people from the sciences may not agree with us when we say that this is an addition to knowledge, because they say already it is a story and you have found out
Yes.
something in that story, so how will that be an addition to existing knowledge? But it is an addition to existing knowledge, there is absolutely no doubt about it. And Ernest Jones did this psychoanalytic reading of Hamlet, and it has helped a lot of people in lot many different ways, right? It's a very
Yes.
easy example for us to cite. No, whenever we are reminded of psychoanalytic reading, we most probably we think about the Mona Lisa of literature, Hamlet, and his Oedipal problems. So that is it. It is an addition to existing knowledge. I agree with you 100%. I just wish that everybody shares this same perspective as you have. And I mean, everybody, I hope everybody in this meeting would agree, because we are humanities people, but I don't know whether others would agree, especially those who would say poets are liars may not agree.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sir, one more thing.
yeah,
You were giving emphasis on becoming creative while writing an academic journal or something. But don't you think that if we become, too much creative, then the objectivity, the chief goal will to some extent be
exactly.
distorted?
I got your question. Yeah. First thing, I was not speaking about being creative, I was speaking about being artistic. Okay,
Yes.
artistic in
Yes.
academic
Artistic.
writing, there is a minor difference, but okay, creative, whatever. See, we cannot have excess of anything, whether it is
Yes, that's true.
dryness, or whether it is, whether it is to delight or to instruct. We need a balance between the two. But unfortunately, right
Yes.
now, academic research that is happening in our country in arts and humanities is entirely about informing, didactic. It has
Yes.
nothing to do with enlighten, something that would delight people. So that
Yes.
delight and interest element is missing, and that is why people find it very difficult to continue their research. The kind of
Yes.
mental problems, the mental anguish that a researcher undergoes, especially if he is doing a PhD for five
Yes.
years. So it is
Yes.
huge. Why? Because there is nothing enjoyable. He feels lonely. Uh, you know, most of us who do research, who do PhD, would end up psychic, right?
Yeah, to some
it,
extent.
it is to an extent we end up psychic, because it is so long-winded, and we want to do we start doing a PhD with a lot of hopes and aspirations. We think that we are going to make some extraordinary findings, and we are going to make some unbelievable contribution to existing knowledge. We have some great aspirations, but what happens is, great expectations always is followed by hard times. So hard
Yeah.
times befall the researcher,
Wow.
and the researcher is going through ups and downs, and the only thing he knows about is stuck. I'm stuck, sir.
Hmm.
Some people say struck, maybe to emphasize their state of being stuck. So struck. So this is what happens, unfortunately. Yeah, we have to strike a right balance between these two. That is what I want to tell you. We need freedom, but we need rules as well.
Yes, sir.
Law and liberty. There should be a balancing between law and liberty. That's
Hmm.
it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Tanni
Sir, one more
Venkat.
question.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yes, sir. From Saraswati.
Yes, ma'am.
She asks that.
Ma'am, the audio is not good.
Yes. Okay, sir.
Yeah, I can see a question on the screen. Tanni Venkat has asked, how can we break the invisible chains that bind us, that surround us? Invisible chains. My dear friend, the only way we can break those chains is by being bold, being innovative, being courageous. And, going against the existing norm is not always easy, and it requires a lot of commitment, a lot of dedication, a lot of hard work. But what most people do, sociologists would tell you that the norm with people is to follow the masses. What everybody does is what we also do, and some very few people, what they do is they will follow the successful people. But what we actually need to do to break these invisible chains, I like your phrase, invisible chains. To break those invisible chains, what we need to do is to be proactive and courageous. We have to do things. Theory won't help. We can do a lot of theorizing, but we have to actually do things, and we have to tell things. We have to tell this story. See, I was telling you a story today, and like Hamlet, like the conch shell that tells you the story of the ocean, I want you to tell the story of this lecture, not about me, but what I told you about being artistic. And that is one way we can create a kind of awareness, because in the Indian scenario it is very difficult for you to break the shackles of conservative thinking. I'm not saying that this is something extraordinary or something out of the world. That is not the case, but people will not accept it all on a sudden. If you say that, okay, I will write it in first person and second person, if your guide is broad-minded, he or she may accept. But we may not always find broad-minded guides everywhere. It is not always possible. Yeah, thank you. Sir, how about, what is it? I missed the question. How about the Sheila Rani Simon? Sir, how about the teacher in the center of all this, caught between research and teaching? Yeah, the teacher teacher is in the center. Teacher is in a critical limbo, I would say, neither here nor there. And what the teacher can do is to do both, and then the teacher has to do other things also, homework also. The teacher has to look after his or her professional career also. So the teacher is expected to be like a goddess, having 10 hands to do all these things.
Sir, one more question from
Yeah,
Saraswati. In the
yeah.
process of academic writing, is it more of unlearning rather than learning?
Is it?
Is it more of unlearning
Is it what of?
rather more of?
Neuro. Could you please spell the word? I didn't get you. I cannot hear properly. Or can you type the question?
Sir, in the process of academic writing,
Okay.
is it more of
Okay,
unlearning?
more of unlearning rather than learning. Yeah, madam, it's a very relevant question. It's about it's a lot about unlearning, as you know, um, who says it? That poem "Once Upon a Time" by Gabriel Okara. I want to unlearn those muting things. That is what we also want to do. We want to unlearn a lot of muting things that have been compressed into our skull by the system, and only then maybe we will be able to learn something new. Very good question. It requires a lot of unlearning as well, and that is a lot difficult when you grow in age and experience. It is difficult to change. A youngster, a young person can change his opinions quickly, but for a person who is very senior, a seasoned campaigner, I don't say they are not flexible, but for them it will become all the more difficult to unlearn things. So very good suggestion. Actually, it is not a question, it is a suggestion. It is a point that we have to unlearn a lot of things before we can learn new things. Yeah, a lot of unlearning is the need of the hour, definitely. Why teach Shahrish Fatima? Why teachers expect research scholars to do everything on their own? Madam, let us not be always critical of uh, teachers or supervisors. They also have their work. Let us think about it. We expect our supervisors to do everything, right? So if we expect our supervisors to do everything, it is natural that the supervisor expects us to do everything. And if your supervisor actually expects you to do everything on your own, you are blessed, I would say, because you have the freedom, because your teacher trusts you, your supervisor thinks that you are good enough to do everything without the supervisor's help. I understand the spirit of your question. Sometimes the supervisors, some supervisors, some places, you hear these things everywhere. They may not be very helpful. They may not be approachable. There are a lot of problems. Such things happen, and the solution. I don't know whether there is a solution, because you cannot, as a researcher, you have your limitations. You cannot ask something to your supervisor if the supervisor is not ready to provide. So a researcher is in a researcher has a lot of limitations, especially in the Indian scenario where, there are some exceptional guides in our country, but there are some guides, but we have to also understand that the research supervisor has her own life, his own life to live, has his or her own academic career to look after, has many other researchers like you and me to take care of. So it may not always be possible for our research supervisor to help us with everything. But of course, we want our research supervisors to help us with certain aspects of our research, to guide us when we are in trouble, to help us when we are stuck, to read our manuscript. And no, never expect your supervisor to be your proofreader. It is not the duty of the supervisor to proofread and correct, make grammatical corrections and spelling corrections. That is, you have to submit the final draft to the supervisor, and then the supervisor can give you her or his own feedback. So that is something that you can genuinely expect. It is, you have to expect that from the supervisor. But if they don't provide, then we are helpless. We don't have any choice, unfortunately.
Thank you, sir. Because of
Thank
the
you.
time constraint,
Yeah,
I would like to request our colleague Shruti to give the vote of thanks.
yeah,
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Principal, respected Head of the Department, today's esteemed speaker, Professor Manu Mangattu, dear colleagues and participants. I consider this opportunity as a prestigious act to express the art of thanking. On behalf of Kids Warangal and the entire Faculty of English, I extend my sincere gratitude towards our Principal Sir, Dr. K. Ashoka Reddy Sir, for his consistent support and inspiration. I also thank our Head of the Department, Dr. Shivashankar Sir, for his encouragement and moral support. It is a matter of personal privilege to thank my professor, our brilliant speaker, Professor Manu Mangattu. It is pretty sure that you all have imbibed his worthy lecture on the art and act of academic writing. He construed the practical and the prescribed implications in the field of writing and how it could be perceived as an art. The lecture satisfies both literary and linguistic aspirations. As we all know, he is a multifaceted genius. He could purport as to an aesthetic and academic realm simultaneously. Thanking you wholeheartedly for accepting our invitation and delivering such a marvelous lecture. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shruti. Thanks to all the participants for your amazing participation, comments, questions. I don't know how to thank you because you were always there on the chat box, supporting me, encouraging me. So thank you all, and thanks for all the nice words and the questions, everything. Thank you so much, and looking forward to meet you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let me thank the backbone of this webinar, our participants. Your support and the cordial involvement make this event a productive one. Thank you so much, dear participants. I thank all my colleagues for taking a lot of pain and industry in making this happen. Thank you once again.
Can we leave the meeting?
Yes, sir.